Yes. All right. I think we are live, Chris. Okay, so I'm gonna look for to find that. But how are you doing today, Chris? How are you
I'm
doing
doing
today?
fine, very much. Been a busy day. Did a legal legislative conference in the morning and a presentation for a chapter in the afternoon, and now I wrap it up with the podcast. So it's been a busy day.
A very busy day, and I'm happy
Yeah,
that we're at the end of the day so that we could definitely catch up on some of the nuggets and some of the things that you've been talking about today that you feel will be very notable.
sure.
Um, okay, so let me, yeah, which is really interesting. So my platform has changed, and I cannot find the disclaimer. Interesting. It's hidden. I don't know what's going on. So, um,
You can
let's
do the
see.
shorthand version. You only say
Yes.
this is like our 15th episode. I think you
Yes.
can
So
shorthand it.
that's right. The shorthand is that we are not here as your lawyers. We're not here to give you advice on what you should be doing. We're here merely to be a source of education, to bring awareness to what's going on in public policy, and give you an opportunity to ask questions for us to have discussions and uh, really promote the art of advocacy within the HR profession. I don't know if that was good.
That was close enough.
Yes,
That was
close
close
enough.
enough.
So
Yeah.
super cool. So first of all, I want to say thank you so much, Chris, and to everyone else Greg Guevara,
Oh yeah.
Shannon Middleton,
Mhm.
Brooke Salazar, Shelly Jackson. What an awesome panel! You guys have just shared so much information, and I can just tell that the audience was just waiting for more information. And so, what I was hoping to do is that if there were anybody joining us today, definitely share your information. Just say hi, where your name, and any questions. Definitely share that with us, so that we can get that covered. So real quick, Chris and I was just having a conversation about the PWFA. Can we kind of start there real quick, and then we can kind of jump in to everything else? Are you okay with that?
Sure. Yeah. So we had a conversation at a conference, legal conference this morning, and question came up about the PWFAs and specifically how it applied to coverage of an individual recovering from an abortion and having the time off. And the question was, well, Indiana doesn't do that, right? Indiana is a state with restrictions. It's not that you can't have an abortion, but what's restricted is the elective abortion, right? So in Indiana, it's exceptions are for rape and for incest and to preserve the life of the mother, right? Are the restrictions, and beyond that, you're just not going to be able to get one. And the question was, well, Indiana doesn't permit it, and so do you have to get that time? And the comment I made was, well, but Illinois does. Illinois does permit that, and so an employee could employ employee of an Indiana company domiciled in Indiana could absolutely travel to Illinois, get an abortion, and on the backside of that, have need of recovery and be able to gain coverage under the PWFA, right? Because the PWFA absolutely provides accommodation for that. That's the EEOC guidance on that. And so it's really irrelevant whether or not the state itself permits them. It really comes down to the individual. And that's really the thing about the PWFA. It really comes down to the individual more than it does to the company.
Yeah, I thought that was a great question that was raised
Yeah,
this
I
morning.
thought it was too. Yeah.
Yeah, because I automatically my mind thought, well, you definitely don't want to. It probably wouldn't be covered, but it was enlightening to learn that it would still be covered under the PWFA.
Yeah, it's a complex law. As a matter of fact, it's so complex and challenging to understand because you heard people saying this morning, you really can't apply the ADA methodology to determining whether or not accommodation should be made. You heard that a couple of times. And you're right, you can't. And companies are screwing this up all the time right now. As a matter of fact, I told all of my clients that at this point, I can't even think how to put something together that could train managers sufficiently enough that we could be comfortable with them making decisions on the front line about what to do. And so I've advised all my clients that anybody shows up and says they want pregnancy accommodation, just call me, because that thing is just a thicket. And it hasn't been litigated to death yet. That'll happen, but that hasn't happened yet. And until that does, it just won't firm up. My estimation is, at least my point of view on what I owe my clients. I was just like, no, just give it to me, because it's too challenging right now. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
And so, what were you going to say? Were you going to say
No,
something? I'm
nothing.
sorry.
I was just going to say, for today's program,
Yes.
we had an election, in case nobody heard, and I wanted to talk about the impact of that election and some of the fault lines I see being established already.
Okay.
That is giving me some real strong indicators of how advocacy is probably going to work for the next 4 years, right? What is that going to look like, and how is that going to function?
Yes, because we just learned today that the Republican Party has now dominated. Ooh, I just
Well,
dropped something.
the Republican Party has secured both in the state of Indiana and at the federal level, have secured control of both houses of Congress. And actually, I wanted to talk about Indiana first, and then I'll go into the feds. But you are correct; they control both. In Indiana, however, the distinction is the Republican control of those houses is so firm that they represent what's referred to as a supermajority. So when you have a supermajority, that means you don't even need the other party's votes to get something passed. You literally have enough votes by yourself to get it done. Now, Indiana's had a Republican supermajority now for 2 election rounds, and has had a supermajority in the Senate since 1961 or something. So I mean, way back. So that part is not new. Having said that, state politics are very different than federal politics, and they are rarely as partisan. Right. And Indiana is the same way. We have a general session coming up that you and I are going to work on. And this is a budget year. So this is what's referred to as the long session. So this is going to be January through most of April, right? Last week of April. And most everything that passes, including the budget, is going to be remarkably bipartisan. Most bills in the state passed with a pretty strong majority of both Republicans and Democrats voting for it, right? And that's because of the legislative process. You go through committees, bill amendments are offered, things are massaged, right? And that's how you tend to get it. But I was just basically saying, as point of fact, if there's anything the Republicans absolutely positively wanted and the Democrats absolutely positively did not, the Republicans could still get it, right? That's the nature of a supermajority. So Governor Holcomb is term limited out, so he'll be leaving office at the end of December. And the governor-elect is Mike Braun. He is a former senator for the state. He is now moving into the chief executive role for the state. Also elected for, again, this is for a second term, Todd Rokita, Attorney General, has been retained. And Jim Banks is the senator-elect for Indiana. And he won the seat that Mike Braun vacated to run for the governor role.
It appeared to be a highly competitive seat, or it seems like there was a lot of commotion, but it didn't appear that way when the votes actually came in.
Banks was in the Republican primary, Banks was just the 800-pound gorilla. And then it also helped that a couple of his opponents had certain technical flaws in their applications to run.
Okay. Yes, that's right.
And so the Indiana Election Commission took 2 of them out, and then there was no libertarian opponent, and so no, he cruised. He got 59% of the vote. Rokita got 60% of the vote. Braun got 54% of the vote. Braun got lower vote because there was a libertarian running for governor. And so
I'm sorry, I missed what you just said.
Okay.
Did you say that Braun? Did you say that Braun received lower votes because of the libertarian?
Yeah, there was a libertarian running for governor, and libertarians are stronger in Indiana than they are in a lot of other states. And I would say the Republican Party in general, certainly outside of the central Indiana confines, has more of a libertarian streak to it than not. So anyway, those are the three big offices that went through this time, and so that means we're going to have a new governor. Now, I expect.
Okay, what does that mean for Indiana?
Well, yeah, yet to be seen.
Or
Right?
HR professionals.
I will say this. I do not know. I don't have any particular insight into what kind of governor that Mike Braun will be, but my expectation is that he will be effective. And the main reason I say that is that he has spent a good chunk of the last half of his life as a CEO. And for that reason, I thought him rather ill-suited for a Senate position in Washington, D.C., where you don't get to move much of anything as a brand new junior senator. I mean, the building is full of very old people who've been there for a very long time. And the Senate works by seniority rules. And when you're the brand new guy, you are literally nothing. I should say the brand new guy, the brand new gal, doesn't matter. You're literally nothing, right? Because you're brand new.
Okay.
And, that's not who he is, right? And so I was unsurprised he was done with it, right, after a 6-year term. And this is far more up his alley, right? The governor is the chief executive of the state, right? It is an executive position. That's his job. And he is a very capable executive. There's no doubt in my mind he's a capable executive. Now, how he gets along with the legislature remains to be seen. Now, he's already had a rough introduction to Indiana politics when he...
Are you talking about the lieutenant
governor?
Yes.
Lieutenant governor.
Okay.
So Braun puts forward, this is where I think he didn't quite understand where the Indiana caucus is. Because remember, I told you, that the House, the General Assembly House in Indiana now is pretty much dominated by populist Republicans. Now, the Senate is still dominated by establishment Republicans, but the House is dominated by populists, and increasingly the county chairman and people like that. These are also populists now too. And as I've mentioned before, the entire nation, I would argue the world. This is happening globally. It's not just us, but
we're all going through the change.
When you look at the historical arc, the establishment is waning and the populists are waxing, and we're going to be in this period. If you look at historical norms, we're probably looking at a decade to 15-year run of this, right?
Oh, okay.
Until the next establishment comes into play. Right?
Until the populace becomes the new establishment, and then
right. And
yes.
So if it's just by historical norms, you're looking at 10 to 15 years probably. So and the cycle has not yet been complete on the Democrat side. On the Democrat side, the establishment Democrats still control everything. And I'm looking at you, Nancy Pelosi, right? So they can, but they're very old, very old, and their populists like AOC and people like that are going to be in charge sooner or later. So the Republicans are just ahead of the curve, right, in terms of their populists taking over. So I don't think Governor-elect Braun was quite prepared for what he went into. Well, as a matter of fact, I'm going to say I know he wasn't. I'll make that statement because the person who he nominated to be his lieutenant governor was a pure establishment pick, no prior legislative experience, really, just someone who would be a loyal lieutenant, right? Which,
yes.
15 years ago, he could have gotten away with no problem whatsoever. They just said, fine. But this is not your dad's Republican Party in Indiana. And not only did they tell him no and slap that down, they then saddled him with a guy that is colorful to say the least and doesn't have much of a regulator on the thought from head to coming out of the mouth. He just doesn't. This is Micah Beckwith, right?
Yeah,
he's a minister in Noblesville, and I've had an opportunity to see him multiple times. He's testified on bills that I've testified on,
Okay.
and
Okay.
he's very much in testimony, just like you see him on TV, or that's he doesn't sneak up on you. He is who
Okay.
he
You
is.
know what you're getting. Yeah. Okay.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
He is who he is. I think he's very genuine. I think he's very authentic, right? But
Mm-hmm.
he is definitely on the outer edge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's telling to me how upset they were with Braun that they stuck him with him, right?
Yes.
So now what Braun takes away from that or took away from that, I have no clue. I don't really
Mm.
know. And in Indiana, lieutenant governor has like no power.
Okay.
They don't have legislative authority. They don't have nothing.
So then I mean, besides, being ready to step in when
That's the
necessary.
whole purpose
Oh,
of it.
okay. So
If the
that's it.
governor dies or is incapacitated, you don't have a decapitation event. It's not like the state doesn't have a head. That's why every state has a lieutenant governor and we have a vice president, and they're there in case something goes wrong.
Okay. Wow. So really no responsibilities to.
Not really. Now,
Interesting.
oftentimes they do take on initiatives that kind of like are their own. So Suzanne Crouch,
Okay.
who ran for governor and did not survive the primary, she ran an extraordinarily effective campaign, and really, had Braun not entered the race, I could have seen her taking it. But he was too much for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because I thought she was very notable. She seemed
she
very
ran her own
famous. I mean,
initiatives.
popular here.
I thought she was very effective as lieutenant governor. She had
Mm-hmm.
her own initiatives that she ran on
Yes.
literacy and things like that. And
Was it
she had that
agriculture as well?
portfolio. Yeah, she did some agricultural stuff. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but she had that portfolio, and Holcomb was fine to give it to her, right? And by all accounts, she was super effective at what she did, and she was respected.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not sure what Governor Braun will give Lieutenant Governor Beckwith to do.
Okay.
But my betting money would be nothing. That would be my betting money, right? So
Okay.
so we'll see, because I think one thing that Lieutenant Governor Beckwith will be real good at doing is generating headlines.
You said generating.
Generating headlines.
Oh.
I think he'll be real good at that. But
Okay.
he
Yeah.
doesn't have any influence, on much of anything, and I don't expect him to. Just simply because it's not him personally; it's the structure
Mm-hmm.
of the office. It's
Okay.
the structure of the position. I'm not throwing shade on the guy in any way.
Okay.
I'm describing what I'm pretty confident will happen. But I'm just saying the position itself is in the main ceremonial, and to the extent that there's anything substantive to do, it's because the governor allows it. There's nothing in the Indiana
Okay.
Constitution that requires those sorts of assignments.
Because I did find it interesting when the news mentioned that, when Mike Braun won, they said Mike Braun won, but it doesn't look like he's going to he's giving Micah Beckwith an opportunity to speak as well. So I just thought it was funny that they even, had to mention that on the news so that you'd pick up like, oh, he's not going to let him speak.
Yeah. So to me, the question is, did Braun get the message or not? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a sharp guy. I have respect for him. I've worked successfully with him. He's been stout on our issues in HR. He was on the Senate Health Committee, Health, Education, Labor, and Pension. So all of our stuff ran through the committee. And I have nothing but good experiences with his office, good experiences with him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm saying I fully expect him to be effective.
I would agree with that too.
Lieutenant Governor Beckwith notwithstanding. But a lot remains to be seen on his relationship with the legislature.
Okay.
Kind of how is that?
And why? Why do you say that? Why do you say there's much to be seen there?
Because when the relationship is good, things work, right?
Okay.
And every governor takes their own tack toward this legislature. And I'll use Mitch Daniels as an example. One of the most successful governors ever in the history of the state. I don't think any historian would contest that. when the Republican caucus wanted to bring right to work up the first time, he would not support it, didn't want it, told him not to bring it up because he had his priorities. It was his first term, and he wanted the legislature to basically subordinate what they wanted for what he wanted.
Okay.
And so he didn't support it, and it didn't go. And then the second time around, they wanted it, and he got behind it, and it passed. So, but right off the bat, he was like, no, not your stuff, my stuff.
And it makes sense. Yeah.
Right?
I mean, yeah.
And in his first term, Governor Holcomb had pretty good relations with the legislature.
Okay, because you just got the question out of my head.
Him in the legislature was COVID.
Okay, yes.
He was issuing orders, and the legislature wanted to be called back for special session, and he refused to do it.
Okay.
And they were like, hey, you're not supposed to be Godzilling all over this stuff. Call back the legislature. I mean, we got to vote on things. And he wouldn't do it. And that fractured the relationship. They did not forgive him for that.
Oh, no, they did not forgive him for that. No way.
They started giving him very unpalatable things to.
Oh, yes. I've heard some of the things that they've said about him.
He didn't like it. So it'll be interesting to see, what kind of tenor does he strike? What kind of relationship does he build with the Speaker of the House and with the Senate pro tem? I mean, these things remain to be seen. It's a new deck of cards. So we'll see. Now, there wasn't a lot of turnover in the Indiana legislature. It's mostly the same people with a few exceptions.
Okay.
2 new senators, 4 new people in the House. No big whoop. Balance of power didn't change. So when we start working in the legislature in January, I imagine we'll see what, if anything, has changed. They haven't had organization day or anything like that. I'm not anticipating any turnover or changes in committee chairs.
Okay.
But again, we don't know that yet.
And that's what organization day is? And that's what organization day is? Well,
I said organization day, but that's the official date on the calendar, but they're going to work it out long before then. I mean, all the back and forth and the jockeying started the day after the election. But we won't know. We won't know until that's produced. So,
and for our committees that we follow, for the committees that we follow, any notable changes there?
Yeah. So the committees of importance to us are, of course, Health and Human Services and the Labor and Pension, right? Those are our bread and butter. Those 2 committees is where our stuff goes. So yeah, I'm not anticipating any change in committee leadership, but we'll see. Okay.
So then
go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry. No,
I was going to say earlier, you had mentioned that, that Donald Trump has talked about, freeing the states and what that could look like for, a state like ours.
That's a great segue. Thank you. Because I did want to talk about the national election, the federal election. So yes. So a change in power always brings in change. And judging by everything that President-elect Trump said during his campaign, and when I look at what he did and didn't get done in his prior presidency, I think it's fair to say that he has a massive appetite for big change. I hesitate to use the word transformational because that was President Obama's, right? President Obama said he was going to transform government. So I don't want to use that term yet. I think that he's going to be more like Reagan, quite frankly. He's going to do his level best to pare it down to size.
And then can you elaborate a little bit more when you say more like Reagan, just for a lot of people who may not really
when President,
know about Reagan?
For the people who are too young on the call or on the podcast. So when President Reagan was elected, government was large. Okay. So he comes in, FDR kind of grows the government, 5x its prior size to deal with the depression, and then it grows even larger around the war effort. Although a lot of the war-based things went away later, but he like laid the foundation for large government. And then LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was the vice president to John F. Kennedy, that's how he got in power, really exploded government. So he went triple jumbo size on what FDR had done. And then Richard Nixon put the icing on the cake with the EPA and OSHA. And then Jimmy Carter finally put the cherry on top with the Department of Education. So you had 3 presidents right there that substantially built out government. And then Ronald Reagan came in behind Carter, was like, no. And the point of view was that government was too intrusive. And so he started eliminating things, but he went after the structures between FDR and LBJ. He didn't really touch the LBJ stuff. He did the other stuff. Mm-hmm. And so he deregulated oil and gasoline pricing. He deregulated airlines, and he deregulated telephone communication. And so those were his big ones. So when I say he deregulated, I mean he literally annihilated the agencies that did that. He just shut them down. And my guess is that Trump knows that history very well. Mm-hmm. And he has a target list. Now, he's already called one out, right? He said that he was going to eliminate the Department of Education.
You said the Department of
Education. He said that during the campaign. He said that during his campaign. And
so what would that even do? I'm like, what would that even do? Like, so, how would that impact the public school system?
Well, thank you. It depends on how it's done.
Okay.
So to put this into perspective for you, Indiana was doing public instruction for 75 years before the Department of Education was ever created in Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It wasn't like they did that. Everything was already there. Actually, that was a big problem the Republicans had at the very beginning when Carter created it, because there's like, we have Department of Educations in 50 states. Why do you need one in D.C.? All they're going to do is boss those people around, which was true. Okay. So the Department of Education has drawn a lot of ire from the folks who voted for President Trump. The Department of Education is the one that has done the Title IX rules. So big issue for a lot of people who voted was trans males participating in female sports.
Okay.
And that's been happening all across the nation. And that's not because the states said that should happen. It was because the federal government said it should happen. And it was the Department of Education in particular that issued that rule. So they, so they are not popular at all. And so what it changes depends. So I was talking to a colleague in Washington, D.C. about this very question. Mm-hmm. We were talking about that because, I was saying, Reagan's template was just blow it up. The duties and responsibilities go nowhere because those went right into the same bonfire that I built for the agency, right? He just burned it all to the ground. And my colleague in DC was like, look, it won't change anything because you can shut the agency down, but everything the agency does will just have to be farmed out to other federal agencies, and they'll just continue to rulemaking. They'll just continue doing their stuff. I mean, the work all has to get done. It'll be just done by other agencies. And I said, possibly, or he can go the Reagan route and just burn it to the ground and say to the states, you're on your own. We're out of business of telling your schools what to do.
Oh, okay.
And that's the reference I made to you of the speech that President-elect Trump did today, where he said it was his intention to make the states as free as they had ever been, to make the decisions for their own citizens and for their citizens to hold them accountable for those decisions. But Washington, D.C. was going to get out of the business of telling them what to do. Now, that tells me he plans on burning down some agencies, right?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that. So do you think the Chevron deference kind of led into that, or because I'm hearing that there's some sort of connection?
fair enough. So Chevron deference, that was a legal decision. Okay. So, but let me take the spirit of that for just a second, right? The spirit of it, because remember I told you we are in a populist curve right now, right?
Yes.
So that's where we are. The political, the nature of politics in the United States and its ebbs and flows move in these giant arcs, right? And we went through a huge populist period back when Teddy Roosevelt was president. Think of those presidents back then, right, where they were breaking up the banks, breaking up the trusts. I mean, this is when Standard Oil, I mean, they were just, blowing up what we call the deep state today. It would be like blowing up Facebook or Google.
Oh my God. Okay.
Right. I mean, think of it in the day, the big railroads, the big banks, the big, the big and massive monopolies and concerns. It was the populists that went after them because they felt they had too much power. Because they did.
Okay. So the same spirit, but different.
Okay. But keep in mind the federal government and how all the agencies operate are creatures of the establishment. So the establishment is what is in the process of being trashed. For good or for ill, right?
It's happening. It's already happened.
Yeah, I'm just reporting what I'm seeing, right? I'm not taking sides here. I'm just saying I can see what's in front of my face. And so that's what's happening. So Chevron, the Chevron deference came up in the zeitgeist of it, right? So when Chevron deference was created, so you have to go way back to Supreme Courts ago. They were the ones that came up with that. And the reason they call it deference was because Chevron had argued, hey, the EPA has absolutely no authority at all to regulate us.
Okay.
And so they were making that argument. Congress has to vote on this, or this has to go to the courts. But basically, they were arguing that the agency was way out over its tips of its skis, right?
Okay.
And the Supreme Court disagreed and found in favor of the federal agencies. And the deference was this, that all the smart people, all the bright people, the capable people, the people who know what's going on, these are the people in these agencies, and they know best. So we, the courts, are going to defer to them. Okay. So if they make rules, it's for the best. If they choose to do this or that, it's for the best, and it's not for us to interfere. They know best. Okay. Well, now you pile on a few decades of them putting out rules that a lot of people don't like, that a lot of people have complained about. They're deeply unpopular and all this other stuff. And you can't take them to court because that Supreme Court decision was there. Hey, it's deference. They know best.
Okay.
And so that just set the pot to boil on high, right, is what happened. And so the Supreme Court undid that and said, come on, nobody's as pure as driven snot. I mean, let's be real here. I mean, you can't say that agencies are made up of people. People are fallible. You can't say that an agency is imbued with unassailable wisdom. I mean, it has to be able to, if it violates the law, it has to be held to account.
Yeah.
So that's what the Supreme Court said. Now, that's not the story that came out of D.C. When the story came out of D.C. was that apparently they destroyed the republic. But anyway, that was their logic, right? You can't have that. You can't be above the law, for Pete's sake. You just can't. We can't just say because you're an agency and we believe good of you that's it. So that was in the zeitgeist, if you will. But we are now in this curve where these sails are going to be trimmed substantially. So what's going to happen is you're going to see a tilt of power move away from the federal government back to the states. So that's what Trump was basically saying. Look, I'm taking these people out of your business. You guys are sovereign. You have your own legislatures. You have your own governors. Your people vote. You go. You do your thing. You be you. I'm not. We're not going to get in the way. And Thomas Jefferson somewhere is smiling broadly. That's
funny. Thomas Jefferson's my daughter's bloodline.
Yeah, Thomas
her
Jefferson.
dad's
Heard that?
back in
Yeah,
the days.
Thomas
Yeah, so that's so
Jefferson, buddy.
super cool.
Yeah. The states were the states were to be the laboratories of democracy. Those were his words. So,
Okay.
so this is kind of where we're headed, and so this goes right to advocacy for us, because
Yes.
when you look at HR advocacy, how we've done it like forever is basically you can advocate and work to influence voting, right, by your representatives, because we have the right to petition, right? Citizens have the right to petition, First Amendment, and so you can get directly to them. But you can't get directly to agencies. That's why we write letters to agencies,
Yes.
but we go visit Congress, right? So
Yes.
Constitution says we could do that, but you cannot lobby agencies, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we've always just written letters, because that's all we could do. We could write letters, and so they are obligated to ask for comment, and so we may, and so that's been the method to do it. But if they really get their sails trimmed, might not be much letter writing going on. But if what happens, what I think will happen happens, then all the action will shift back to the states, and that would just mean that we'd be less in DC and more in Indianapolis.
More in Indianapolis. Wow.
Yeah.
So now back to the Department of Education. So, if that does go away on the federal level.
Yeah. What I expect the Trump administration to do is just to annihilate it.
So then what would that do here? Because or maybe I might be confused, because I think at one point the superintendent of education was a position that you could vote for, but now it's no longer something you can vote for.
Yeah.
It's appointed.
It's going to be appointed.
So is that something that would change then? Is that something that could possibly?
Yeah. Okay. So, that's just Indiana handling its own knitting, right? I don't know. Possibly it could. They changed it back from what it was, right? So it was
I'm thinking it should, right, at that point, because then you shouldn't just have one person, or I guess in my head, one person that just gets to appoint everyone at that point. It just seems like I don't know, or maybe I'm just talking outside.
What I do think will happen is that he will just zero out the whole thing. And Elon Musk will be, see, I told you, and because he's in charge, he and Vivek Ramaswamy are in charge of government demolition, if you will.
Oh my gosh.
Well, you got to remember, Musk is the dude that when he bought Twitter, laid off 58% of the staff, and it didn't miss a beat.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I don't know what those people
probably
were
going to
doing,
figure it out.
Obviously, it didn't affect keeping Twitter up. So
now, could that happen in the States? Could that happen in the States where it's just like, hey, we've got too many agencies here in the state? I don't even know if that's even a thing.
Well, the Indiana state agencies are small. So,
okay.
So now California's are massive, right? New York's are massive. So
isn't it a whole other country?
I thought California was another country. States, as a general rule, government is relatively small. As a general rule.
Okay.
I'm not saying every single one and all that stuff, but yes. Yeah, we don't, and we don't fund it very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not a concern here.
Yeah, it's like in Indiana, it really is a public service because they don't make it attractive to do from a financial standpoint. But
no, not at all.
But
it is truly public service.
That would go away, and I think that Trump will just say, "Hey, I just cut this much money out of the budget," because it's very clear to me that he intends to fight inflation two ways. And the hardest one is cutting government expense, because it's something that every politician wants to do while they're running for office and not what they want to do once they're in.
Because they realize they need it, or they want it, or whatever.
Well, first of all, it's hard.
It's hard. Okay.
So first of all, it's very hard. Politically, it's hard. Okay. Politically, it's hard, because what happens is that once these agencies get established and doing things, there are all kinds of jobs that are created in response to that. Right. So we have whole lawyers like the ones this morning where we had a lawyer that was all over PWFA. We had a lawyer who was all over these things. Well, if you aren't doing those things, That
Then they
kind of
get
stuff
to,
doesn't exist. You don't
yeah.
have not-for-profits that work to petition to get grants or things from different kinds of agencies, right? So the reason I say they're hard to cut politically is because if you try to cut that politically, then everybody that makes money off of that starts screaming at you.
Even the ones you didn't realize were getting money off. Yeah. You're like, whoa, okay.
You're affecting their livelihood now. I mean, these are jobs.
Yes.
And so that's how they become so ossified. It's not just what's in DC, it's everything else attached to it, which is vast. And so I'm very confident that Trump and Musk both know this extraordinarily well. And so they know that when they cut that, that's not the half of it, because in their heads, they're going to get the benefit of all this other stuff happening. Because in order to get inflation under control, the reason he wants to get expenses under control is because how we handle things is we don't do budgets. How clean, so we do spending resolutions, and then we look at how much revenue we brought in, and then however the gap is between what we want to spend and what we have in our pocket, we just print the money. We're the only country on the planet that can do that. So we just print the money. The problem is when you have a fiat currency like we do, and fiat currency is meaning one not tied to gold.
To the gold.
Something
of value.
So that's why on the money it doesn't say it's a gold certificate. It says full faith and trust of the United States government, right? the fiat currency. And so this is kind of like Econ 101, right? But with a fiat currency, every time you expand the print, you devalue the dollars. And so this is what happened to us. We printed so much money in the last 4 years that we looked at it in terms of pricing. So everybody said eggs cost so much. In reality, it was, why does the dollar suck so bad? So, but everybody was thinking of pricing, right? But in reality, it was a currency devaluation that was the problem. But try telling it to somebody and it says, okay, thank you very much, professor, but the eggs are still more than I have money for.
Yeah. And all I know is that the eggs are expensive.
I get it, right? But that's what we do. So every time we spend more than we have, we just further devalue the dollars, which just further exacerbates the gap between the purchasing value of the dollar and what the costs are for the hard product like eggs, and it just ripples throughout the entire economy. So if you don't want to print the delta, the only thing you can do is not make the demand. And the only way to not make the demand is to cut the costs significantly. And the reason I think he's going to go after the agencies is because they all report to him. They all line up under the executive. Right?
Okay.
The only authority that Congress has relative to the agencies is the House controls their budgets. Okay. So the House does the budget. Yeah. So we have divided government, right? So House does budget and the Senate does basically does advice and consent on government positions, signs off on treaties, all that stuff, right? So they have divided.
So the president has every power to kind of downsize, the agencies that he has to serve.
Yeah, they all line. They all in the Constitution. They all line up under the executive branch, and the division of power means he can tell Congress to. Now, Congress will probably scream because they are politicians, right? So he starts dynamiting things, and somebody in his state says, "Hey, my business gets, 30% of its money performing contracts for the Department of Education."
Oh, goodness gracious!
And you nuke the Department of Education, and you just nuke my company.
Okay, so that's what you were kind of talking about, those strings that you can.
That's why things don't get cut. That's why things don't get cut. Politicians who have to run for re-election, right? So. Here, I'll ask you a question here right now.
Okay.
Is Trump going to run for re-election?
You said, is he going to run for re-election? I mean, no. I mean, he can't. He's termed out at that point, right? Yeah. Exactly. So it's just like.
Do you think that makes him less powerful or more powerful?
Yeah. Very powerful at this point because there's nothing. Yeah, you're not worried about anything else at this point. It's just like just do it. And yeah. So then,
Yeah. And
so what could advocacy really look like? So when you say like it could actually, well, before I even jump there, because you were talking about inflation. So SHRM did
right.
send out an alert on inflation today.
Yeah,
Did
yeah,
you see that?
it ticked up. Yeah, it ticked
It
up.
ticked up. So what does that mean in relation to what you were
It
just
means
talking about?
it means the Fed got bad news because they just did another rate cut. They thought it was going to go in the other direction, and now it went this direction. So it's a bad day for Jerome Powell. That's about it.
Okay.
But no, on the federal side, I did want to switch, right? Because
Okay.
when you think about where government goes, and you've probably heard the saying before that, well, it's common in DC. Personnel are policy, meaning the people you choose make the policy. So
Okay.
so
Okay.
you want to have
Personnel
policy
or
go a certain
policy.
way, you got to have a person to do it. And so the administration is shaping up, right? So Susie Wiles, has been named chief of staff
Hmm.
for the president-elect. She was his campaign director. So this is the first time since Jimmy Carter that a campaign director has been named chief of staff. Chief of staff for Jimmy Carter was Hamilton Jordan.
Mm.
And then Tom Homan is going to be the border czar. He's the former director of ICE. And
Okay.
so he's going to be
Okay.
the border czar, and he's going to be the guy in charge of deportations. And the government has already identified their deportation target groups. So
Okay.
anybody who came into the country and was admitted and known to be a criminal at the time
Hmm.
is going to be found and deported.
Okay.
Anybody who
So
came
that's the
in,
list. Okay.
and then committed a crime after you were here. Military age males from China and Iran who have entered the country are also going to be targeted for deportation.
Hmm.
So that's the list.
So
Right
then,
now.
you were mentioning earlier, the Department of Education is, Trump already made a speech today saying that that's on
Well,
the
he
list,
made a campaign promise.
promise on that. So
That was a
then what
promise.
about,
Yeah.
and then earlier we were also, you had, we were talking about FCC and OSHA,
Oh,
and
yeah.
OSHA seems like it's more
So
really, for
OSHA is
HR
another one
professionals.
OSHA is another one I could see him getting rid of. I really could. OSHA is really vulnerable to a Chevron argument. Really vulnerable to a Chevron argument.
Oh.
Now, what basically when OSHA was created? So first of all, a number of states had their own safety, worker safety agencies. A number of them did. New York did. A bunch of states did.
Hmm.
And so when OSHA was first created, Congress wrote it so that they actually had to go to the states and say, okay, would you rather run your own safety agency, or would you just have us do it? Because we'll do it. If you don't want to do it, we'll do it. We'll do it.
Hmm.
And so 7 states said, yeah, go away. We'll do it. Indiana was one of them, very predictably. Very
Hmm.
predictably. So we have IOSHA.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
if
Yes. Yes.
OSHA
Yes.
goes away OSHA goes away in Washington, D.C., Indiana's like,
We're
okay,
good.
one less report, right? I mean, it's
That's
just,
right. Because they were wanting to kind of make some changes to IOSHA, and IOSHA was kind of pushing back. Weren't they kind of
yes,
pushing
they
back to
were,
that?
yeah,
Yes.
because
Okay.
yeah,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
IOSHA, we wanted to
That's
do
right.
things our way, and the feds wanted to do their things that way, and gee, that's never happened before between the states and the federal government. So
Okay.
yeah, so no, I think IOSHA would be like, cool.
Okay. So then the state of Indiana would just follow
Yeah, but some
IOSHA,
of these
just make
other
sure.
states would have to stand up agencies.
Oh, they would have to set up. Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Yeah,
because
that's
all the other
right.
states were the other states all went to the federal government and said, no, you do it for us. So
Well,
they would
then,
then have to turn around and stand up their own agencies.
oh my gosh. Would they get money from the federal government to do that?
I doubt that.
Oh, goodness. Okay. So
Oh
then,
no,
oh,
because he's going
wow.
to be saving money. I mean, this is his
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
I mean, it's Trump. You know, he's going to put up like some giant thermometer on the mall, you know, with the dollars saved going up. I mean, metaphorically, I don't want anybody to get angry at me. I don't think he would realistically do that. But I mean, like maybe online, maybe there'd be on the White House, there'd be a page, you know, a link to
he would show like how much money.
He's going to want to talk about it. I assure you. I mean, every time he cuts a nickel, he's going to have a press conference. I mean, come on. So it's how he rolls, right? That's how he rolls.
Mm-hmm.
We know that. So yeah. So I imagine people in DC who lost their jobs might get jobs in other states since they know how to do it.
Wow.
So
I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, because when you think about when they talk about the workforce peak of 27, where they're saying like by 2029 that most of the United States is going to be experiencing the highest turnover in the workforce labor it's ever seen. It's never went through anything like this because a lot of people are going to be retiring. So it's really, you know, a high turnover due to retirement. And they said the hospitals, you know, that the people leaving are going to be the ones who are going to need services, but we're not going to have people to.
No.
Okay, go ahead.
So he's not going to eliminate the Social Security Administration. He's not going to eliminate, you know, some of these others, but he may well trim their sails quite a bit. I can easily see him saying, "Okay, you're basically overweight. I'm putting you on Zepbound, and you're going to go down, go down to this." I could easily see that kind of thing happen. But here's the thing about the two guys he's got doing this stuff. I mean, now how Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, I assume that they're going to work with the Office of Personnel Management, OPM. I don't know. They aren't going to have any. I don't quite understand their authority yet. I imagine what they're going to be doing is they're going to be examining things. They're going to be looking at things, and they're going to be going to Trump with the target list is what I think is going to happen.
Okay.
And both of these guys have giant appetites for massive cuts. Now, how much of that actually happens, how much that actually gets done remains to be seen. But I expect this administration to be very aggressive about that because the people that voted him into office want that. They want that. A lot of his people were animated along lines of the federal government has become too powerful, too bossy, too distant, too detached from us. They don't talk to us. They don't pay attention. They don't care what we think. So, I mean, fine. I'm going to send a guy to Washington, D.C. with a wrecking ball and a hammer and fix their wagon real good. And he won the popular vote. I mean, I mean, you can't go to the guy and say, hey, you know, too many people want you to do that. And he's going to say, more than don't. I think that's what he's going to say. So we're in for a ride. Any way you slice it, we're in for a ride. So I've been able to detect some things in terms of who he's picked for roles. For National Security Council, for SecDef. And I'm not sure that SecDef can get through. We'll talk about that in a minute. But he does not want armchair generals. As a matter of fact,
what do you mean by that? Like, Trump wants him in that position, but he doesn't want him to be in that position?
No, Trump does not want armchair generals, meaning he does not want generals who don't have current combat experience.
Oh, so you mean like armchair quarterback? Oh, okay.
Yeah, he doesn't want any of those guys with stars and stars and stars and, you know, the whole chest full of ribbons and stuff like that. If he doesn't see a Bronze Star for Valor from Afghanistan, he's not impressed. And the reason I say that is because the people he is appointing are all that. Multiple combat tours, multiple medals for valor. You know, it seems to be an early theme. Is what I'm saying. I'm just noticing similarities, right? And so Mike Waltz is that. So he's going to be the national security guy, council head. He's currently a representative from Florida, VMI grad, Army Ranger, then later Green Beret, 3 tours, 2 in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, 4 medals for combat, 2 for valor.
Oh, wow.
He's got Lee Zeldin in at the EPA, and I looked up Lee Zeldin. He's from New York.
Okay.
And as near as I can tell, he's never, ever, ever done anything with environmental policy in his entire life.
What's Trump's what does Trump want to do with the EPA then?
My expectation is his job is to keep them out of the way while Trump unleashes all the energy companies in the US and tells them drill, frack, put up turbines, put down solar panels, I mean, whatever, wherever the energy comes from, get it.
Okay.
And I think Zeldin's job is to make sure the EPA doesn't get in the way.
Okay.
Because otherwise it makes no sense.
Okay.
To me, it doesn't make any sense. He's not bringing anything to the table in terms of this deep, steep knowledge in environmental policy.
And what is he currently doing now?
He's a congressman from New York.
Okay. And which, like, does he have like committees that, he's like well known for? No. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
So, okay.
So Kristi Noem has been named Homeland Security. I don't know why she'd want that job, but apparently she's going to do it. She's the current governor from South Dakota. So good news for the lieutenant governor of South Dakota. So we have next Marco Rubio, current senator from Florida. Looks like he's going to be moving into the State Department, be Secretary of State. Okay. So that means that Ron DeSantis has a choice to make.
Now you were saying that you were saying. So what does that mean when you say Ron DeSantis? Because DeSantis would have to.
In Florida, the governor is the one that picks the person.
Appoints the person. That's right.
Appoints the person who's going to finish out that term, or at least finish it out until there can be a special election. I'll have to look at Florida law a little bit more.
Okay.
But what I was referring to, every state has different rules for how they handle things when somebody suddenly leaves, dies, or resigns, or gets another job. So Florida's is the senator's the one that picks. Then we have John Ratliff in at the CIA. He was the director of national intelligence under Trump in his first administration.
Okay, so he made it back.
And his job is going to be to clean out the CIA.
To clean it out. Yeah, that's right. Because there's levels of the CIA that will be.
I think a lot of people are going to be filing retirement paperwork between now and January 1.
And that's what I'm saying. It's just the numbers, CIA, because I think the numbers didn't include FBI, federal government. So the workforce is really, okay, I guess we'll see what it looks like next year, right? Yeah.
I think if you're asked, moving on to Elon Musk. So Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are part of this newly created group called the Department of Government Efficiency, which the abbreviation is Doge, which I find hilarious.
Hold on, what is it? Doge?
Doge, D-O-G-E, and remember, Dogecoin was one of the early cryptocurrencies.
Because he's bringing it back, isn't it? Trump like trying to bring life back to the Bitcoin? Isn't Trump?
I don't know. I don't follow crypto that much.
Okay,
but
that's what I've heard.
I just thought that strikes me as something that he and Musk thought up. Well, I was going to say over beers, but Trump is a teetotaler, so it obviously wasn't over beers. But I'm sure that Musk is the one that came up with that.
You said teetotaler?
Yeah, Trump doesn't drink. He's a teetotaler. He does not drink at all.
Oh, okay. So that's what a teetotaler is somebody who doesn't drink?
Yes, they do not drink. Yeah, they do not drink. Yeah, he used to when he was younger, but his oldest brother Fred died from alcoholism and the effect on his liver, and Trump stopped drinking because of that. Never had another drop after that.
That's sobering. Okay, wow.
Yeah, no pun intended. So these two guys, I'm not exactly sure how they're going to do it, but I think they're going to take the targets to people. And then I think what's going to happen is that Trump will order the people who are in charge of these agencies to slim them down and make a minimal budget request, because Congress can't make them spend money. All they can do is consider their budget request.
Okay.
So I think will happen, and he's just going to say, get rid of a lot of people. Just get rid
there
of
really
a
is
lot of people.
I honestly, like, here in a few months, because I think this always happens, is that we'll have a conversation, and then, by the next time we meet again and, talk about it, then, like, it's just completely a whole different.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have felt like for the last 6 years in this role, it's been like dog years.
Oh my gosh.
The rate and the pace of the change and the magnitude, it's not simply the change itself. The change we've been going through has not been incremental. It's been these huge swings, and the waves of change are getting even broader, even heavier. So we're just at a point where we are right now, where you just have some really big forces that have been pent up for some time that are just about ready to bust. And what it looks like after all that's done, I have no particular insight other than it will look different.
Very different. Very different.
I'm comfortable it'll be different.
So we are at time. It is
okay, very good. Yeah.
So what is there anything that you want to say, like, for HR professionals? Like, there's a lot that you've been,
Yeah. So for HR professionals, I think our advocacy is going to be pointed more toward the state of Indiana. I think that's where the action will be. We'll probably be writing fewer letters to agencies, largely because I think they also won't be allowed to make rules, any new rules. They'll just be told stop.
So a lot more going to the Indiana General Assembly
opportunities. What I think is going to happen is you're going to see this big tilt as because you have to remember, from the time the country was founded and how the federal government was created, how the Constitution was created, the founders never intended the federal government to have any particular great power whatsoever. And they designed it to make it almost impossible to get anything done on purpose, because they didn't want the federal government to bother the states. So they wanted the federal government to do trade, they economic stuff, treaties, defense. There were some big things they wanted the government to do, but they wanted them to leave them alone otherwise. And it did for a long, long time until it didn't. So that's where we are. And, we will know in a year, the impact of the administration's initiatives.
Okay. And this will give us an opportunity, and not to be reactive, but to, stay aware and be proactive throughout the whole process where it's necessary for us to be.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I personally believe that knowledge, not simply about what is happening, but why. I think the why is really important to understand, because you can draw incorrect conclusions from the what.
Yes.
If you don't know the why. And that's why I spend so much time talking about the why. And yeah, I think we'll have a better point of view when we do the podcast next.
It's the 11th. Are you available? Okay, we're still good for the 11th. Okay.
Yeah, wouldn't miss it. So, so thanks again, Tracy. Yeah, we're at the time, and I will see you next month.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris, and everyone. Have a wonderful day, and until next time, bye.